What drives a man to kill over 7 people and blend into society undetected for nearly 2 decades? Today, we're looking at the disturbing story of Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. Behind his ordinary appearance, Ridgway hid a horrifying secret that troubled the Pacific Northwest for years. Who was Gary Ridgway before he became one of the most notorious serial killers in American history? What led him down this violent path, and how did he manage to avoid capture for so long? In this video, we'll cover Ridgway's life, his crimes, and how he was eventually caught. We'll look at his early life, the gruesome murders he committed, and the investigation that finally led to his arrest. This is the story of Gary Ridgway, a man who lived a double life, causing fear and suffering while maintaining a facade of normalcy. Gary Leon Ridgway came into the world on February 18, 1949, in Salt Lake City, Utah, from a working-class background. His parents, a bus driver father and a retail worker mother, played crucial roles in his early years. Ridgway was the middle child, with 2 brothers on either side, and his family life was filled with tension and dysfunction. His father often showed disdain for sex workers, a view Ridgway would later adopt in his violent acts. Ridgway's relationship with his mother was particularly troubling. She was controlling and emotionally abusive, exerting a lot of power over him. This unhealthy dynamic was made worse by her severe punishments and humiliation, especially regarding Ridgway's bedwetting issues, which lasted into his teenage years. She would subject him to harsh punishments, like physical scrubbing of his genitals, likely contributing to his feelings of shame and anger. In school, Ridgway faced academic challenges. He was diagnosed with dyslexia and had an IQ of 82, which made it hard for him to succeed and interact socially, leaving him feeling isolated and inferior. Early signs of his disturbing behavior included a fascination with fire and cruelty to animals, which are often early warning signs of violent tendencies. These early experiences laid the groundwork for Ridgway's deep-seated anger, confusion, and resentment. His mother's controlling nature and his father's negative views on sex workers likely played a role in his later violent actions. Despite leading a seemingly normal life, married, working, and having a family, these early events shaped Ridgway into one of America's most infamous serial killers, setting the stage for his future crimes. Gary Ridgway's killing spree kicked off in 1982 with the discovery of his first victim, Wendy Lee Caulfield, near the Green River in Seattle. He targeted young, vulnerable women, often sex workers or runaway girls, who were easy targets due to their vulnerable situations. Once he isolated them, Ridgway's method was methodical and chilling. He would strangle his victims, usually with his bare hands or a rope, and then bury their bodies in remote forests or near the Green River. He often returned to these sites to indulge in necrophilia, reliving the power and control he felt during the murders. By the end of 1982, the bodies of 5 women had been found near the Green River, sparking a massive investigation. Despite the increasing number of victims, Ridgway managed to evade capture, leading a seemingly normal life as a husband, father, and truck painter. The random nature of his victims and the lack of forensic evidence made it hard for the police to connect the murders to a single person, allowing Ridgway to continue his killing spree undetected. For nearly 2 decades, Gary Ridgway skillfully evaded capture, executing his murders while leading a life that appeared normal to those around him in the Seattle region. The hunt for the Green River Killer became one of the most extensive in U.S. history, involving hundreds of detectives, FBI agents, and criminal profilers, including the renowned John Douglas. Despite these colossal efforts, Ridgway consistently outmaneuvered the authorities, thanks to his meticulous selection of victims and systematic approach to murder. Ridgway targeted individual society often overlooked, such as sex workers and runaway youths. This choice not only facilitated his approach to them without detection, but also prolonged the time it took for his crimes to be discovered, as many victims were not reported missing immediately. He would suffocate them, usually in his vehicle, and then scatter their bodies in secluded areas, sometimes in groups, to further obfuscate the investigation. Throughout the investigation, numerous suspects were questioned, and a vast database was established to monitor potential leads. Ridgway himself was subjected to multiple interrogations, including a polygraph test in 1984 that he passed, which allowed him to slip through the net. It was in the late 1990s that the investigation took a significant turn. Improvements in DNA technology enabled forensic experts to re-examine old evidence, leading to a pivotal breakthrough in 2001. DNA from Ridgway was matched to semen found on the bodies of 3 victims, definitively linking him to the murders. His capture on November 30, 2001, marked the end of a nearly 20-year-long pursuit, offering a much-needed sense of closure to a community that had endured years of fear. Gary Ridgway's capture on November 30, 2001, signified the dramatic conclusion of a nearly 2-decade-long search for the Green River Killer. Following the DNA evidence that connected Ridgway to the murders, law enforcement swiftly moved to capture him. Ridgway was apprehended at his residence in Ridgefield, Washington, where police discovered evidence linking him to the crimes, including maps and photographs of the murder sites. Upon his arrest, Ridgway initially denied any involvement, but eventually confessed after a lengthy interrogation. In a shocking agreement, Ridgway admitted to the murders of 71 women, though he later claimed the actual number might have been as high as 80. His confession was remarkably detailed, providing insight into how he lured, killed, and disposed of his victims. Ridgway's cooperation extended to aiding authorities in locating the bodies of some of his victims, a grim indication of his desire for control and his need to revisit his crimes. In exchange for his confession and assistance, Ridgway was offered a deal that avoided the death penalty. Instead, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. This agreement was designed to ensure Ridgway would disclose the locations of the remaining victims and provide some closure to the families who had suffered for years. Throughout his trial, Ridgway's behavior was notably aloof and emotionless, displaying minimal reaction as the terrifying details of his atrocities were revealed. His trial, which commenced in 2003, became a spectacle for the media, capturing widespread attention and delivering a somber conclusion to a case that had left both the public and law enforcement struggling to comprehend its severity. The plea bargain and Ridgway's subsequent incarceration provided a form of justice, but also underscored the deep and enduring effects of his actions on the families of the victims and the broader community. Gary Ridgway's capture and conviction offered a semblance of peace to the families of his victims and the community affected by his crimes. Ridgway was sentenced to life in prison without parole, a term he is currently serving at the Washington State Penitentiary. Although his imprisonment removed him from society, it failed to ease the profound sorrow and trauma felt by the families of his victims. The repercussions of Ridgway's crimes went well beyond his direct victims. The revelation of his extensive murder list and the chilling details of his confessions left an indelible mark on the Seattle region. The case became a symbol of the perils faced by those vulnerable, particularly sex workers and runaway youth, and shed light on the systemic issues in addressing their well-being and safety. In addition to the personal anguish inflicted on the victims' families, Ridgway's case had significant repercussions for law enforcement. It spurred advancements in forensic science, especially in DNA analysis, and highlighted the necessity for improved strategies in tracking and investigating serial offenders. The case prompted a re-examination of how missing persons cases, especially those involving marginalized individuals, are managed. The legacy of the Green River Killer also led to changes in community and policy aimed at preventing similar tragedies. Efforts have been made to bolster support systems for vulnerable individuals and increase public awareness regarding the dangers they face. Ridgway's atrocities served as a stark reminder of the importance of vigilance, empathy, and effective intervention in protecting the most vulnerable members of society. Despite the conclusion of his trial, the psychological and emotional scars left by Ridgway's crimes persist, serving as a chilling reminder of the darkness that can hide behind seemingly ordinary individuals. Gary Ridgway was a man who wore many masks: husband, father, churchgoer, and friend. But behind each one was a cold-blooded killer who preyed on the vulnerable and took pleasure in their suffering. His story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating those around us and the importance of vigilance in our communities. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.